So we have a few minutes for questions. Does anybody have a burning question that you want to ask one or throw out to the panelist? Or does a panelist have a burning question? Number 4 on your speech.
Number 4. Oh.
Okay.
It was end collective bargaining.
Okay.
Thanks for asking.
Yes. I should ask the first question. The first question is, what are we going to do with the decent public school teachers who are trying to raise their families and can't leave the job? That's the thing that bothers me the most. There are some very decent, God-loving teachers out there who are caught in the system that provides their insurance through their union and things like that. What are we?
I'll start.
Good.
You know, in socialist economies, the government runs all sorts of things. They run grocery stores. They run industries. And when those economies move back toward freedom, it's not that we suddenly stop needing grocery stores. We're not suddenly going to not need teachers anymore. We still need them. We just need to build new and improved systems where they can make a living, where they can educate children properly. And, you know, it would be crazy in America to suggest that because we have some poor people, the government should run all of our grocery stores, and yet that's the attitude I think that we've taken toward public education. Well, there are some people who can't afford a private school, there are some people who can't homeschool, therefore we need the government to run the whole education sector. We need education. There will always be jobs for teachers, there will always be jobs for people in the education sector, but we can leave a corrupted, rotten, destroyed system and move them into productive, good, positive systems where actual education is taking place.
Okay, Lynn?
Yeah, I just add a simple point. We encourage them, give them courage, connect them with like-minded teachers, supportive parents, community members, and let them know that they're not alone.
I want to add to
I don't know
that.
if most of you know, but actually Texas is a non-union state. So there are no teachers. You can have teacher organizations, and of course they try to get around all that. But and one of the things that I've been fascinated by, because I'm teaching, you know, I'm living in California for 40 years, and there's always this debate of why Texas and California have almost the identical person population. I mean, if you just look at the stats of racially, ethnically, economically, they have about the same people. But the issue is that Texas always outscores California by a good deal. And people keep asking, why is that? Why is that? And I keep saying to people in California, it's because they don't have a union. You know, my sister was a superintendent in Texas, and she had a math teacher in a rural school district, and the math teacher was okay with the white kids and not okay with the Latino kids. The kids just never made any progress. And she could call that teacher in and say, here's your scores. This is what it looks like. I'm going to send you this summer to be trained to teach mathematics to this particular group of people. And she didn't have a choice. You know, the school paid for it, but it was like, okay, you're not doing all right. I'm not saying that's happening everywhere in Texas, but it's very interesting to see the difference between a union state and a non-union state in terms of academics.
Mary,
In the back?
Mary, I'd like to add to that last question before you go to the next one. Teachers are in crisis. They're terrified. They have been for a long time, and most of the great ones are retiring early. What a tragedy. And they'll be replaced with indoctrinated younger ones who come out of our government-run college system. So it's really important to stand around teachers right now and to empower them. If you come to Public School Exit, they'll show you, there's a list of like 30 different types of schools where these teachers can learn how to run their own one-room schoolhouse, or they can join a network where they're training homeschoolers. There's so many options for these teachers. And you mentioned the insurance. If you come to our website, forkidsandcountry.org, there's a union exit tab, and underneath it we show the alternative liability that these teachers can get for a fraction of the cost, no politics, and they actually get double the coverage and better coverage. So there's no reason for these teachers to stay in these schools.
Right.
It's time for a teacher revolt.
Okay, great. There's someone right there. No, you're standing. You've been...
Thank you. Coming off of that, a lot of teachers, we are a right-to-work state. And so the teachers do have the option to opt in or opt out of the unions in Tennessee. Also, a lot of them are not aware that they have other choices like what you offer. In Tennessee, actually in Franklin, we have a group called Professional Educators of Tennessee led by J.C. Bowman, and he offers them a way to step away from the unions and get some of the better benefits like what you're talking about. So I just wanted to make everyone aware because a lot of the teachers don't understand that, and they operate in fear for their jobs and their families, and they don't know that they have options.
Yeah, I was able to hear her okay. I don't know if the crowd did, but she's basically saying teachers are afraid and they don't know they have options and they don't know they can leave the union. Well, so when we brought our lawsuit to the Supreme Court and then another subsequent case, that was our argument. We didn't want teachers to have to pay unions. They don't have to pay them anymore. Neither do any other government workers. Why don't they know? Because the unions passed a bunch of laws because they control a bunch of the legislature, state and national. They passed a bunch of laws to make it illegal for employers to tell people their rights. So that's why it's so important that you all adopt teachers. And again, that union exit tab on our website answers the questions, everything you were just addressing. We actually help teachers walk them through these steps, and non-teachers too, government employees. Okay. No one needs to be in these unions anymore. And by the way, all 50 states are now right to work. That was part of our lawsuit too. Everybody's free. Nobody in all 50 states had to pay a union.
But you're not free if you don't know. You're not free if you don't know. That's why I say information, education, then activation.
Right.
There
Right.
are
They
groups
have to
that
know.
are outside
That's
of
what
the
you're saying.
system that ought to be engaged in marketing that knowledge to teachers in order for us to see the kind of turnaround that needs to take place. Mm-hmm. It will not take place when ignorance is in control.
Exactly.
Okay.
And by the way, in the
Wait,
movie
one
we are teaching them that in the movie. We teach them that in my book, which I think there's some copies here today. So we are trying to educate them. My people perish for lack of knowledge.
Okay, Carol wants me to, okay. Where are we? There you are. Oh, good, I'm Mike.
Is it on? All right. Here in Williamson County, I'm the chapter chair of Moms for Liberty here, and we recognize the burning building. And, you know, we exhausted every civic avenue over the summer to get a toxic curriculum taken out of our schools, and we met a brick wall, you know, at the school board and the county and at the state. So felt the need to create something, an exit strategy for parents that are caught in the middle. They can't quite go private, but they want to get their kids out of public. And maybe they're afraid of homeschooling. A lot of parents are still terrified of homeschooling. So we sought to create a middle ground. We called it Liberty Schools. And it's Liberty Schools, a network of Williamson County homeschools. We have 2 of them, 2 locations. The north location has 2 pods, is 20 kids, and the south location smaller, just starting up. However, the greatest barrier we've found to doing this model, and by the way, this model is a little bit different because we took teachers that are disenfranchised in the public school system and are tired of being, you know, chained to a toxic curriculum of indoctrinating kids, and they're tired of the heavy-handedness of the central office that gives them no flexibility whatsoever to exercise the craft of teaching. They have to follow a script. They're tired of it. They want out. So we take those teachers and we match them with parents that are similarly disillusioned with the school system and put them together and establish that beautiful partnership between the parent and the teacher. So that's what we've done. But the hardest thing to do is find a location.
Oh.
Because here's the thing, you would think everybody turns to like, oh, go to your church. Your church is going to give you a location. They don't. It's extremely hard to find a church that will open their doors to you during the week. There's a couple different reasons. Sometimes the church just like, I don't want to get involved into politics, and maybe they don't understand the war that we're fighting. Other churches don't want to be targeted because some churches are also woke, as we also, unfortunately. And even within the Franklin city limits, we found out the hard way that there are some city ordinances that are hostile to educational activities in a church. And even though those ordinances can be applied discretionally, they always go against the school. So we have one of our Liberty schools which is looking for its forever home, and it's hard to find. We're trying to help and brainstorm as much as we can, but here's the thing that's really amazing about that pod is that the teachers and the parents, they're brainstorming together. They're like, we created something beautiful here, and we're going to problem solve as a partnership, and that is amazing to see. So that's a big lead up to my question. Are there grants available? Is there assistance available to help the little one-room schoolhouse that we're trying to build? It's a seed right now. It's a seed, and it's taking root, and it's going to blossom into something amazing. And are there resources available to help this be, a city on a hill to show that this can be done, and there's help available to find locations and resources?
Right. Well,
It's a great question. It's a great question and a great opportunity. I think the word that you used, I think that is applicable here, is problem solving. The ability to look at the problem and determine what is the best way to solve it. I think if you have a network of families in your community, that's a starting point for financial support. That means looking at facilities that may be available and finding out the cost for renting it and then bringing everybody there. The other thing is talking to the business community, to those men and women who own businesses, who have children, who recognize the danger that they have in the public school system, to get them to partner with you and to perhaps put investment teams together that are investing for the purpose of the school, doing fundraisers and things of that nature. So there's got to be ways that we got to get around this. And then we've got to deal with the fact that we are funding these Luciferian institutions of indoctrination. How can we pull our money out of that and put it into areas where we want it to go? That's where we need to run candidates and politicians that are of the same mindset and worldview that we have, that they get in and start making policies that support our efforts. So it's not an effort that's going to take an overnight solution. It's going to be one that's long-term, and we need to go in it for the long haul.
And when you achieve some success in political campaigning to get like-minded candidates in these decision-making positions, advocate for school choice reforms at both the state and local levels, so that your taxpayer money can be channeled more meaningfully and more sustainably to your educational choices.
Yes. There's a question right there.
Okay, yeah.
Or a comment.
Carol wanted to say something.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
You wanted to say something too, Alex, right?
Yeah, Carol, please.
No, you go first, but there's someone here that is representing the local Hillsdale School.
Oh,
and I
good.
wanted her to speak, Sandy Wells, after. Sandy, could you come to the microphone and be ready to speak after the panel finishes commenting?
And I'd like to just add a couple quick things to that. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I can't tell you how much it warms my heart. Things like that are happening all across America, and praise God, Americans are generous, they're entrepreneurial. We can solve this, folks. We don't need the government to solve it for us. I want to say any pastor that doesn't have an extremely good reason not to help out here should hang his head in shame. The Great Commission says we are to make disciples of all nations. And, we want to send a missionary to some third world country, and yet we're going to lose our own children here because we're not discipling them properly. These pastors ought to open up the doors of their church. We have a board of advisors for Public School Exit that is absolutely phenomenal. Rebecca is on it, and many other wonderful people. We have people that are working on this right now all across the country. A couple quick examples. We have a lady who's doing independent learning academies, and what they have found is a model where churches bring in revenue by opening up their doors. So we'd be happy to connect with her. They're doing it all over California, Idaho, Washington. So the churches get money, their liabilities covered, even teachers are paid, but it's still a homeschool co-op. It's an alternative, and it's cheap. We've got a college in northern Idaho that is now training one-room schoolhouse teachers all across the country to run, and obviously the financial side as well, run one-room schoolhouses all across America.
What is it called?
The college?
Yeah, no, that organization that does.
Oh, Public School Exit.
Public School
You can find us at publicschoolexit.com. Look at our advisory board. We're happy to connect you with any of them. Nobody's making money off of this. We're all volunteers, including me. And on the topic of school choice, I just want to add a quick warning on that. And again, you know, on all these issues, I fully respect everybody who's fighting in the trenches with me. We agree on 99% of stuff. I just want to give you guys a real warning about school choice. Not through my choice. I was living in Sweden for most of the last decade. And about 2008, they passed a school choice measure. Same rhetoric. Oh, the money should follow the child. Parents should have choice. And it sounded so great. Everybody agreed. Then in 2011, while we were there, I saw it happen. It was a conservative government came in. They said, hey, all this public money is going to all these private schools. We need accountability. And so they said, all schools that are taking government money must teach the government's curriculum. They must all do the government's tests. No more Bibles, no more prayer. At that point, every public school or every private school except the one that teaches the aristocrats was dependent on the government money. They all overnight became government brainwash camps, and they banned homeschooling, so there'd be no exits. So like Marva Collins, the wonderful Chicago educator who I mentioned earlier, said, we've got to keep government money and government clause out of the education of our children, in my humble opinion.
The only thing I want to add to that, to the Moms for Liberty, come see me afterward. I'll give you my business card, because not only are there all those options through Public School Exit, but these churches don't have to deal with the education bureaucracy if they create it as a homeschool. And we can help you to understand that so that your churches they don't have the liability issue they're worried about.
Okay, we have a couple of things, and Sandy Wells would like to tell you about the Hillsdale School and the 1776 commission part of it. And then with Mary Poplin, she's done some very important research about public schools and the effectiveness of teachers. I'd like for her to be able to say a few words about her research. And then we'll get the two people that are at the microphones, and then we'll shut down, and your lunch will be here, and we'll have some time to fellowship.
We really appreciate the honor to be here, Dr. Swain and Moms for Liberty. A couple of years ago, there's a few of us that said, you know, we really need another option for our Williamson County schools. So we started talking to Hillsdale College. They have a full curriculum for K through 12, and we received their approval to start our school here. Well, we're hoping to open in 23. It'll be K through 5, and then each year afterwards we'll add an additional year. It is a full classical education, and what that means is there's a real strong focus on language. It's the same, rooted in the same liberal arts of the STEM courses, but there's Latin and Greek and a real focus on civic virtue, which starts in kindergarten, and moral philosophy. And the whole purpose is they want people to be able to think and speak and be able to converse within, I heard Dr. Arndt say, within the confines of the Declaration of Independence, which of course is our freedom. It's a wonderful, wonderful curriculum. The history is the 1776. What we're doing now is we're collecting signatures so that we can let the school board know in Williamson County that parents would like another option. So if you wouldn't mind, up here, we've got someone at the table. Dan, wave your hand. If you all wouldn't mind going there, if you're from Williamson County, and just signing the petition so that we can let the school board, because we do have to go before them. We hope that we get their approval, and then we'll go to the charter organization. This is a public charter school, which means there is no tuition, but we do need your support for that. So thank you. Oh. And if I could just say one more thing, because this just touched me so much. I don't know if any of you all got to see the movie, C.J. Lewis's movie, and his conversion to Christianity. when I saw that movie, if I had not become more versed in a classical education, I realized that it was because of the studies that he did under wonderful thinkers like founders and philosophers like Socrates and Aristotle that our children will be learning on as well. He would have never come to his Christianity without that, being able to think. And that's what we want to do. We want to teach our children to think on their own, not be taught what to think. So thank you, and please support us.
Okay. Thank you for taking my question. So in Nashville, there are an increasing number of charter schools, and there's lots of private schools in Nashville. As we move away from a government-run public school paradigm, in your opinion, what role? So some schools are government-funded, charter schools, like the Hillsdale School would be. What role does a government have in regulating schools? Back in 2001, I guess No Child Left Behind was passed, and there was a lot of attention to testing. And we want to test people, and then we know that some standardized tests were made easier so that we could score higher on those tests. But also, so you've got the government trying to hold higher standards, but then lowering standards. What role does the state government have in regulating and holding schools accountable to any academic standard, in your opinion?
That's a very good question. I would say do no harm, number one. Government, you are to do no harm. Number two, provide a safe environment where kids are not in some kind of potential harm, and then stay out of the way.
Thank you for that question. Phenomenal. And thank you, Pastor. I would say the first place we need to go to find the answer to that question is the Bible. And the Bible defines the role of government very, very clearly. Just open up Romans 13. The job of the government is to punish evil. And God already did us the favor of defining evil: murder, rape, robbery. These things are evil. That's why our founding fathers said you have a right to life because murder is evil. You have a right to property because stealing is evil. So the job of government is to stop evil. If there is murder, rape, robbery, things like that going on in a school, then the government has the sword. The government's job is to come in and deal with that. Beyond that, I say they should have absolutely no role. Parents and teachers and communities and the people who fund the school should be able to handle that. And my big concern with the tax money that is more and more, in my state, especially in Florida, is flowing to private schools and things like this, is that eventually it's going to be like the cheese in the mousetrap. Free money, and the mouse looks at the cheese and says, I wonder why there's free cheese there. Never mind, I'll eat it. And then the trap closes, and then you're stuck in the system. So I think we need to be very careful. And we just saw this with the Supreme Court ruling just a few days ago, folks. We don't have to take the injection, but if you work at a hospital that takes federal money, put your arm over, right? So where the government money goes, the government's rules follow. And it's already the case. If the government is funding a school, that school is not allowed to teach the Bible. They're not allowed to have children praying. They may be able to teach it as literature or something like that. But the Bible is the Word of God. It's not just literature. And so in my opinion, we just need to we need a separation of school and state. We need a giant wall between the two. That's my opinion. Thank you.
In the meantime, I think that to keep up with this movement of growing alternatives, especially charter schools and other school choice alternatives, we need to introduce and advocate for policies and legislation that keep up with these changes. So policies and new bills that advocate for more academic fiscal transparency, policies that opt parents in for prior consultation and parental consent, to especially controversial issues, bills that parents' bills of rights. We need to support new policies as well at the same time.
I'd like to say a couple of things. If you have any doubts about what happens when the government comes in, think back to President Bush's institution of faith-based organizations where government was given to churches. And he was, through those faith-based dollars, that it made it possible for when there was a change of administration and the Obama administration came in, for them to use that money to open it up, to any kind of organization that claimed to be religious, because the government can't discriminate across religions. And you also saw churches that purported to be conservative at the time, and they were pastors that seemingly leaned, conservative. As soon as the Obama administration went in and they started pushing the LGBT agenda and various agendas, you saw those pastors flip because they were feeding at the trough. And so that's always a danger when you take a lot of government money. So that's one thing. The other thing I'd like to say is that with charter schools and private schools, and I don't care whether they're church or schools or not, they have to be monitored, because a lot of times there's corruption, there's misuse of funds, and so there has to be a system of accountability. We don't want to have a situation where those organizations are not being watched. If they're not being watched by the people within the school, then clearly the government has a role to make sure that they're doing what they say they're doing. And so that's my position on that. And then as far as this panel, I'd like, this young man here has been standing, I'd like for him to speak, and then I'd like for Mary to talk about her research some, and then we're gonna break. You can talk to the panelists after we break for lunch. They're gonna be around for you to do that. So,
Please, go ahead.
Good morning, and thank you so much. I'm Pastor Kendall Baker from Houston, Texas, and I just won an HISD, Houston Independent School District trustee seat. Conservative candidate, 4 of us run, 3 of us made the runoff. I beat mine. My question to you on the end there, and you, ma'am, is that our teachers' unions are out of control. They have padded the pockets of the existing liberal members of the school board, but they're not coming nowhere near me and my colleague. How do we rid the school district of these unions? You mentioned earlier, there's a way to part ways with them. They have a stronghold in Harris County. They're all on the news, all over the paper. They're friends with everybody. And so when I go home into my next meeting, in fact, I had my first meeting Thursday, you can just feel the weight. So fasting, prayer, and living right is all important when you're in this seat. But we have a big battle ahead of us, and you brought that, and so that stuck with me. What's the first step in getting rid of a loosening that grip of the power that the union has on over our district?
This is great. This is great. So at your local level, the first step, you and I have already chatted. You're already praying. You're already fasting. You're great. You need to find, you and whoever's on your team in your community, you need to start adopting teachers and find out which ones agree with you. Okay, you probably already know some that go to your church or whatever. You get a small group, a leadership group. And then I get on a Zoom call with you, and I'll train them on how to start a war room. They'll start a war room, and they'll start bringing in more teachers, and all of y'all will do that. We'll teach you how to do that. And you get, unless we can get the government to make these unions illegal, we got to fight them one at a time, right? So this is how you fight them one at a time. So then we just train you on that. You grow your numbers, and we do it in a very covert way so the unions don't destroy what you're doing. A lot of prayer. And as you grow, you get to a certain point where you have enough numbers where you can start working on what's called a decertification effort. Okay. They only need a simple majority, 50% plus one person, to decert these unions. So we can help you with that.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's a marathon. It's a marathon. It's not going to happen overnight. Men and women, we're in this to rescue the republic, and it's going to take an effort over time to break the grip.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm standing between you and lunch now. It's a really bad place. It's not that I wouldn't do it, but yeah, I'm not going to. I'm just going to tell you, I've edited a book called Highly Effective Teachers in the Worst Schools, because one of the most important things is that whatever school you reinvent, that the teachers really know how to teach. And I can tell you that if they've gone through a teacher ed program, that's not likely right now. So they need to know how to teach reading, how to teach math, how to teach everything, geography, political science, and we studied 50 or 60 teachers over almost 10 years who worked in the poorest and worst schools, worst scoring schools in the greater Los Angeles area, and their scores week after week and year after year were exceptional. And we just studied them. And I can tell you, they are tough. They're tough. They know their curriculum really well. They know how to give a little piece at a time to kids. They know how to check it. They know how to encourage kids. So at the same time of being tough, they're some of the funniest and most encouraging teachers we ever saw. So there are some great people in some of the worst schools, and there's a lot of data about that. And I had a graduate student, Matthew Smith, who's done a study of, did a study of 20 black men who came into the California state system into college and were doing well, and he interviewed them about their experience in the public schools. And every single one of those 20 could name one, only one of them could name two, teachers who caused them to really achieve and go for college. And their stories are wonderful. Then they each nominated a friend of theirs who did not end up in college, and not one of them, when they were interviewed, could name a teacher who had made a difference in their life.
And Murray,
Pretty different.
could you give 2 examples of some of the things that the teachers did? Because I know about some of these teachers, how they were able to connect with those students.
Well, the first things they did in the first days is really to set a very safe and very organized classroom where there wasn't much going on except the first days, they often asked the students to introduce themselves. In one classroom, which I thought was probably the most successful, it was a junior high classroom, which is a tough area to teach, that she had, every student had to bring a paper bag with 3 things that meant a lot to them. Now, I'm listening to this, and I know the teacher's not a Christian, but almost every single student either had a rosary or a Bible in their bag. So and then she got to know who they were, right? And they were tough, and when she handed out rulers, she said, "These rulers are mine. They belong to me, and they're not back scratchers, and they're not things to hit your neighbor with. They're rulers, and if I see you do any of those things with my ruler, I'm going to take it away." And the punishment in this science class, with junior high science class, was you didn't get to do the experiment at the end of the week if you were not up on your lessons and all sorts of things. But they were very good. The other thing is when they gave an assignment that students were to work on in the class, they never stopped moving. We never saw one of these teachers sit down. They just didn't sit. And I'm talking about classrooms that are full of 35, 40 kids, right? We're not talking about, a classroom in a really wealthy school where there's only a few children in each classroom. And they just never sat down. They just went from place to place to place. Only one of them wore spike heels. But there were just a lot of different things. That, I'm happy to send you something on it if you'd like.
Thank you so much, Mary, and let's give the panel a hand.